first and foremost, you're a hell of a guitar player.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I didn't know about you, unfortunately, until you joined the Roth band. So where did you come from? I know that's a very complex, loaded question.
No, it's a very simple question in my mind. I'm from the UK originally. And that's, I've been living in the UK my entire life up until 2019, which is when I got my visa to come to sort of work and live in America. It's an artist visa, so it's kind of like a temporary visa. I'm not a citizen here. Right. I've been in LA ever since, basically, and that's kind of when I guess I got the Roth gig, and my sort of career path changed a little bit, because back when I was in England, I went to university, went to music school, left that when I was 21, and as soon as I finished university, I basically went straight into teaching at a music school, and I also had my own events band where we would do like weddings and corporate gigs. So I did that for like 3 or 4 years or so, which was great. I met loads of great players and learned loads of new things and styles in my craft. But it was around that time when I realized that you can always teach and you can always play in those types of bands. There's never like an age limit kind of restriction. You can do that when you're 60 years. And a friend of mine who's a producer who I used to go to school with, who now lives in LA, hadn't seen him in a long time. He invited me to come to LA to stay at his house, just to sort of like see what the scene is like. So I took him up on that offer like 5 or 6 years ago, just for a couple of weeks, saw LA, and I was like, wow, this is a pretty cool place for a musician. And then from then I kind of every few months I'd come back and forth on like a tourist visa just to meet people and everything. Did that for a few years, and then 2019 got my visa, came to LA, and the rest is history. Been here ever since. So yeah.
When you came to LA on that first trip, did you go to the Cat and the Fiddle, or is that the second trip?
No, I didn't. My first trip, what did I do? I was here for a couple of weeks, and it was more just hanging out than anything and doing more tourism stuff. And it wasn't until like the next year when I came back with more of an intention to meet people that I started to explore the scene and meet people and go to different jam nights, like the Whiskey and the Viper Room and the Rainbow and all these different kind of venues, and meet people. And it's still good, but this, because LA is like such a huge city, I've barely scratched the surface of what was here and who to meet kind of thing. So it was good to kind of get started in that way, which meant that when I came here on my actual visa that let me stay here, I'd already had a bit of an understanding of where to go and people in town. But even now, there's so much I haven't done. I always meet new people, and they're like, oh, you know this person? I'm like, nope. Have you been to this gig? Nope. Have you been to this jam? Like, nope. There's so many different pockets of scenes, and there's like a rock scene, there's like a jazz scene, there's like an R&B scene, there's like a country scene. So there's still so much more to explore. I still see myself very much as a newbie. So yeah.
Anytime I speak to somebody who's British but living in LA, I like to find out, do you know about the secret Robbie Williams soccer game?
I don't know about this, but now you've mentioned it, I'm interested. What is this?
I guess it's the kind of thing where he lives in LA to kind of escape superstardom. Yeah. And he was having a soccer game at his house, I guess, every week, or, if he's not on the road. And a lot of other musicians were playing there. I don't know if Billy Duffy from The Cult was part of it, but I heard that Rod Stewart was in there a little bit. I heard that Rivers Cuomo from Weezer, not from England, was part of it. So the answer is no, but one day you'll be in that.
Okay. Now that you've mentioned it, I'm going to make it my goal to get involved and be invited to Robbie Williams soccer, and that sounds very much like something that I would, one of those very surreal LA moments where like, oh look, there's Rod Stewart and there's Robbie Williams and here's Rivers Cuomo and anyone else, and we're just playing football together. But that stuff, it does actually, the funny thing is like that stuff does just happen out here. In LA, like you find yourself, like last week, a friend of mine hit me up at midnight for a gig the next day, and he was like, what are you doing tomorrow? And I'm like, I'm around, whatever, I'm doing nothing interesting. And he's like, okay, because Jamie Foxx wants us to play at his house. Yes. So I was like, okay. 12 hours later, I'm at Jamie's house with a band I've never met before, just jamming on some funk tunes, playing for Jamie for his alcohol company, Brown Sugar Bourbon. And I was like, this is pretty interesting. This is not how I saw my day going, but that kind of stuff, every now and then it does happen. You just find yourself in these weird scenarios where you're like, how did this happen? But that's, the benefits of living here and hanging around kind of thing. So yeah.
Wow.
Which is cool.
So many questions about that, but I'm not going to go there. What I want to know is, as somebody who can shred tastefully, but chooses not to do it when they don't have to, was the long-term goal for you to be a singer-songwriter, a composer, or is there not a defined goal or title for you?
It's a good question. I would say my goal has probably changed a bit from, let's say, when I first picked up a guitar to 5 years later to now. I think as every kid, I started playing when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And at that point, yeah, I wanted to be the guy who was playing stadiums, touring the world, playing rock music, ideally my own music if possible, so that was my goal when I was younger. And then the more I did this, when I started actually playing professionally with people, my goal kind of shifted, and I thought, actually, it's probably quite hard to do that for a living. So I found myself doing more of like the teaching stuff, and and then after I did that for a while, I was like, well, I don't really want to do this for the rest of my life, because I can always do that, and I enjoy teaching, but it's not the reason I picked up a guitar is to teach people to play, because I want to play for myself. So that after a while, I was like more focusing on being like a sideman and just playing for people, gigs and everything. And I did that for a while. And then with my YouTube, it's always been something which I've had kind of in the background, more of an outlet for me, where I would put up my own music, kind of to have that experience of being like a composer, an artist kind of thing, but never really trying to do that, because obviously being a guitarist, writing mostly kind of instrumental music, there's not a huge market for that, and there's only so many people who want to listen to it, mostly going to be guitarists. So I always knew that I probably wasn't going to become like Steve Vai or someone, because back in like the 80s, there probably was a big market for the shredder guitar solo career kind of thing. Nowadays, it is out there. There are some great guitarists like Mateus Asato, who are doing, like the Instagram guys and the TikTok guys, who are doing some really cool stuff. But it's probably isn't until maybe more recent in the past few years, when I got back into YouTube again and putting my own music out, that I realized, well, maybe there is some part in my future that I could do a bit more of like my own thing. And I've got a few friends who have said, we should put on like a guitar night where we just do our own stuff and we jam on each other's songs and just be a bit more like, do our own thing. Because that's one of the issues I've noticed being like a sideman for people is I love it. I love playing with other people. I love coming up with parts for people and recording and playing live. But you're always playing other people's songs. So you're always limited kind of their vision, which is fine. I'm happy to do that. And I love collaborating. But at the same time, being a musician, most musicians do want to create in some form or another. So that's what I do my YouTube stuff for. And it seems to be growing slowly. I try to put it out as much as I can, but it's quite hard to like write, record, produce, mix, video, edit, and put it all out every couple of weeks. So sometimes I have lapses in how often I get to put stuff out, but every time I do it, I love writing, and my YouTube following, people like it, and people say like, are you going to put out an album soon, or are you playing anywhere? And I'm always like, maybe in the future. So maybe once I hit like 10,000 subscribers, I'll maybe put a bit more time into actually making that a thing, because then it'll indicate to me that there is a small audience maybe that wants to hear me do my own thing. But yeah, I'd say that definitely doing the solo artist thing would be cool, but it's, as someone who's obviously been in the industry, I know how hard it is to do like a solo career and make it work. You have to put so much time and effort and energy all day long, every day. You have to be on it some form or another, whether it's creatively working or from a business perspective, managing yourself, branding, media, marketing. It's a whole thing to really become an artist. It's a very difficult thing. It's why not many people do it, because it's a hard thing to do.
There's 10 different ways. 10 different ways you could find that kind of success. And you made an interesting point about how maybe in the 80s it was easier to do the Steve Vai, Joe Satriani instrumental route. Something I did hear, though, is Brad Gillis from Night Ranger makes his money not so much from Night Ranger, but by making instrumental music that's in the background of sports highlights and video games and scoring on that end. And what he's playing is not far off from the Vai stuff.
No, you're right. The interesting thing, like you just brought up about the industry, is I think a lot of people who aren't in music think like, oh, you want to be a musician, you're either a major artist touring the world, or you're not. But there's a whole spectrum of things one can do in this thing. And what you just said there, the idea of music for TV, for shows, for games, for commercials, library music, that's a big industry, and there's a lot of money to be made there if you can be successful and you can get in with the right people. And I have friends who do that, and that's how they make a living. They just compose for TV and movies, and they just sit at home all day writing, and they get to have the luxury of just being in their own house and just writing music, and that's it. But they don't have to worry about the problems that come with maybe being famous, you know, and as glorious as that may be to some people, it's also not so great to not be able to live a normal life, you know. So I think, you know, I have friends who are producers who, you know, they make a lot of money, but no one really knows who they are. So they get to just enjoy their fancy house and their nice car and not worry about having people swap them all the time, you know, not being able to go down to a restaurant. So like Brad Gillis, it doesn't surprise me that people are, you know, because I think, you know, one thing that I think COVID taught us is that the live playing industry at any moment can be taken away from us, just because, you know, if something comes up and stops us all from playing and shuts us down, then you have to have something else to do. And if you're a writer and a composer, then at least you can fall back on that and turn that into more of like a way of making money. So I'm trying to do a bit more of that, like, because I would love to do more writing and composing and have that actually be one of my main ways of making a living, as well as the live stuff. Because I also noticed that the older you get, you don't want to be playing necessarily till 2 a.m. when you're like 60 years old, because you might be, you know, wanting to settle down and relax, you know.
Unless your last name is Lukather, then you do.
True, then you just, you know, you live all day. Albert Lee as well, same thing, 70 years old, is playing all the time. Like, man, I hope I'm got that energy when I'm older, but I'm starting to notice already I quite like my own space. So, yeah.
Well, you brought up COVID, and it did actually interrupt the tour you were in the middle of. You were playing with the David Lee Roth Band, opening up for Kiss. Did you know how long that tour or that gig was going for, or was it kind of week by week, let's see where we're at?
Oh no, I knew, like, from when I knew from the start how long that was going to be, and it was going to be all of 2020 was on the road. Basically, it was going to be a great year. We were supposed to do from the end of January is when we flew out to the first show, which was on the East Coast in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I think that was the first show. And then we were going to do 6 weeks on the road with Kiss, kind of going around, you know, which we just about did. And then we were supposed to do a 2-week Vegas residency straight after that. And then we were going to have a break from the tour. And then it was going to be more like David was going to do some of his own stuff without Kiss. So there was a whole bunch of festivals lined up. We were supposed to play at this one that Metallica put on. I can't remember what it's called, but we were supposed to play at this thing that they put on. There was another one that was more of like a pop one. Some big pop artists were going to play, like Billie Eilish, and I was like, that's pretty cool if we get to be on the same bill. And then the tour was going to resume again in the summer, which is going to be from like August until October, another 2 months on the road. And then at that point, you know, who knows? That was the year's schedule. And then we started, obviously, and we did 6 weeks right before we were supposed to go to Vegas, and then COVID happened.
Yeah. And
at that point, we were like, okay, well, we have to stop the tour, fine, whatever. But we'll be 2 weeks and we'll be back on the road again. Like, we've still got our Vegas residency planned. And then like a week would go by and like, yeah, Vegas is still going. It's still on the site online, as you can buy tickets. Another week went by and okay, we're going to postpone that for like another couple of weeks. And as things went on, it was like, oh yeah, we're still going to go back out, but it's just going to be like, okay, maybe it's 3 months later. Oh, okay, 6 months ago. Oh, the end of the year we'll go back out. The start of next year. And they just kept going back and back until eventually it was the start of 2021 when we got told like, yeah, David's probably not going to come back at the moment, hasn't got any plans. So unfortunately that's that. And by this point, like a year had already gone by. So I was like, okay, I understand, like I'm used to this now. I'm kind of already doing some other things, but if it comes back, great, because I had such a blast playing on those shows. You know, what guitarist wouldn't want to play Van Halen with David himself playing arenas in America? You know, I was like, cool, you know, pretty privileged I got to do that. So it never quite came back. And then there was talk of it coming back to this Vegas residency just on New Year's Eve, just gone, and some more dates throughout January. I wasn't going to be part of that because they were using a different band lineup. Because when I did it, I was only playing rhythm guitar, and they had Al Estrada, who was on lead. He was like one of the best guitarists you'll ever hear. He can nail Eddie like no one else. But he's also got like his own style. So he's not. Yeah, he's not like an Eddie. He's not just like an Eddie clone. He's like, he can do Eddie, and he sounds great, but he's also does his own music, and he's like fantastic. And he can shred like Malmsteen, but he's also got this great bluesy feel. So Al was always the main guy, and I was coming in to replace someone else who was playing rhythm guitar. Another fantastic guitarist, actually, a guy called Frankie Lindia, who is also awesome. You know, so I was like, wow, I'm surrounded by all these great guitarists. I have to really step up my game now and make sure I can do this properly. But so I only ever came in to play rhythm and do the tour. And then when that all kind of like disappeared, they were going to go out again and do this Vegas residency, but just with one guitar, bass, and drums, kind of more like the classic Van Halen lineup. Because when I was on the road, there was 2 guitars, drums, bass, and keyboards. So it was a bigger band. Oh,
and before you, there was a period where there was 3 guitarists too. Yeah, that lineup changed a lot of times.
It did, yeah. Because I came in like right before the tour started, and when I was talking to the guys, like, oh yeah, we've been through so many different lineups. At one point, there were backing singers, and they had no backing singers, and they had like the whole band had changed. Every single member had changed just in the rehearsal period, and they were all like, we're not even sure if this is going to happen at one point. And then it kind of fell into place. I jumped in a few weeks before we went on the road, and the rest is history. We did a great 6 weeks on the road, amazing, you know, playing with like a wall of Marshall stacks, you know, all literally all turned up to 11, like this, you know, and that still wasn't loud enough, you know, apparently. But yeah, so I got to do that, and you know, who knows what the future will bring. Like with David, like he might go back out again. Like I hope he does, because there's a lot of people who still obviously want to see him and hear him. And so if he wants to go out again with the big band, then great. I'm looking. Hopefully he'll bring me back on board. You know, I'm still friends with the band and everything, and they're all in the same boat. Like we hope, you know, it goes ahead. But you know, we're having to wait and see. You know, with COVID, you can't really predict longer than like a month in advance at the moment, because you never know. You know, so
yeah. So you got to do about 20 gigs, is it?
Probably. I'm trying to think. Maybe not that much. It was. We were playing maybe 4 or 5 shows a week for about 6 weeks. So yeah, maybe just around 20 shows we did, and yeah, they were great.
Yeah, those shows, it was pretty much the hits and 1 or 2 deep cuts. Did you know how to play all those songs before rehearsal? And the reason I ask that is because there's been like 3 or 4 different Roth lineups that had a 2-guitar approach to it. And I didn't know if it's the kind of thing where you go, okay, I'll double this. Like, I didn't know if you were writing your own parts, and that in a way has to be learned, or you just go, oh, I know, I've been playing all these songs since I was 12.
Yeah, so the good news is, being a fan of Van Halen, I knew a lot of them anyway. I didn't necessarily know how to play them. I just knew the songs just as a fan listening to them. And I also knew a lot how to play, just because I just learned how to play them. But for the most part, it was, here's the songs, here's the set list, go and learn them. You've got a couple of weeks, learn all the rhythm parts, and try to be aware of the lead parts as well, because, you know, if anything happens, an illness, injury, someone's got to play the show. So it kind of helps to be in that position that the show must go on. You know, that's the way that has to be. So I was mostly just learning the rhythm parts, which I wasn't given like a ton of guidance. It was like, you know, the songs, go and learn them. And then we rehearsed for a couple of weeks. And there was like some things we knew we were doubling, like some lead parts, like on the intro to Jamie's Crying, there's a lead that starts off. So I was doubling that with Al, and like Ain't Talking About Love, those kind of lead parts that he does. I was doubling those as well. But for the most part, I was just on rhythm, and it wasn't too hard to work out. You just listen to the songs and you can hear pretty clearly what's going on. Like Van Halen were never like a huge, big production band with like Def Leppard, where they have 100 guitar parts.
Oh, yeah.
It's also awesome. I'm a huge fan of Def Leppard.
Yeah, me too.
But Van Halen was much more old school, very like, you can hear everything, just guitar, bass, drums is pretty much all it was. So that's why I was like, oh, it's interesting to bring on another guitarist, because that was never really the Van Halen thing. But yeah, we pretty much stuck to the record. We had a few parts where we would extend sections, and where David would talk and change a few things, but for the most part, it was pretty much just the parts are as they are. They're already great parts. They don't need anything to change about them, and also if you're a fan of Van Halen, like, you know the solos, you know the riffs, that's how it should be, kind of thing. So I just learned things as they were, and if there's anything that needs to be changed, you know, we would figure it out between myself and Al. Like, he was like, because he really knows his Van Halen, so simple things like on You Really Got Me, for example, that riff. So for all the guitarists out there, it's basically just like an A to G kind of and I was playing like an A power chord in the open position, and then going down just to the 3rd fret G, and he was like, once you go to the A, back to the G, don't go back to the A chord, slide up to the 5th fret and play a single note. So it's and move up to the 5th fret. That makes sense. Just because he knew like very intricate details of how it was supposed to be played, kind of how Eddie would play it. So there was only a few moments where like he would say, yeah, try playing it like this and blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, it was kind of fairly self-explanatory as what I had to do.
That one I never heard before. I've heard that everyone is playing Unchained incorrectly. Is that one of the other ones?
Well, what did you hear, like how they played it? Because
they have the riff on the wrong part of the neck that they're doing it, and they're also not hitting the open string correctly. It's not necessarily tuned correctly. It's just the kind of thing where the way that Eddie is playing it was actually easier than what everyone else was trying to do.
Okay, so with Unchained, yeah, because that's a great riff and everything. Luckily, there was no real like you're playing it wrong kind of thing. When I heard it, I was kind of just trying to play it as is, and just checked a few YouTube tutorials to make sure I was playing it right, and then we rehearsed it, and it all sounded fine. So I was like, cool, no problem. But the way I would play it is, obviously, pretty much all the Van Halen stuff was dropped half a step, and then that was also drop D tuning. So, and actually, I was using this guitar here, which I think actually might be a little bit damaged at the moment, but we'd have this one of these guys here, the AVHD tuner. So we could be playing in standard, and then we pull this guy out here, and that would drop it to D. But the problem with, because we had when we were playing, our set was so tight, 45 minutes, that we didn't really have time in between songs to kind of adjust, change guitars. So we played Panama straight into Unchained. And the issue we found with that was Al would start unchanged with the riff, but because with a guitar like this, it's got a Floyd Rose, which means the bridge is kind of floating. If you drop it to D, the tension on the strings changes, and then everything goes slightly out of tune. So we always had this problem where the guitars would both go a little bit out of tune from the moment that song started, and we couldn't really do anything about it. Luckily, it's not something which I think most people would care about, but we always listen back to our recording.
You have the A440 in your head, so
and then everything would shift slightly because we're dropping to D. But I always played it. I guess you could play it in a bunch of ways. I was just playing it kind of like,
that looks like what I saw on the correct tutorial.
I hope so. I'm like most guitarists, I try to find the easiest way to play things because I don't want to give myself a hard time, especially if I have to play it again and again and not make mistakes. But I guess a lot of people would play it as a full chord and then do this. Sounds cool, but I'm like, I want to make it easier, so I would often just play just the triad. I suppose sometimes I would change. I think we'd start the song maybe full chords. I can't remember what I did actually, but either way, it was it worked, and
it worked. It worked, and you can still play them. The reason I bring that up, there was a really great Steve Vai interview that came out in the last week or so. Steve Vai secretly taped all these interviews in November and December, mine included. So basically, when the album was coming out, he would just be everywhere. Like, that was a brilliant thing, instead of having to do everything the week it came out. And one of the interviews, the person said, so when you were going to reunite with Dave, were you going to play Going Crazy? And he's like, I haven't played Going Crazy in 30 years. Let me see if I know how to play it. And he did. But in your case, did you know how to play the solo Dave stuff too, or is it just Van Halen for the most part, and just like Paradise?
Yes, so I knew some of the solo stuff. My first introduction to like solo David Lee Roth was actually from like 15 years ago on a game called Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And the game
Yankee Rose.
And one of the songs was Yankee Rose. And I was like, 12 years old when I heard that, and just picked up guitar. I was like, wow, that's really cool. The guitar's like talking, and he's playing is like nothing else I really have heard, because it's Steve Vai. So I was always a fan of David after that, and I bought one of his albums, and I heard Jason Becker, another guitarist who played with him, and I was like, wow, that's another incredible guitarist and everything. But we only did a couple of like David's solo stuff, like Just Like Paradise, Tobacco Road. What else did we do?
Just the Gigolo and California Girls, if you want to call those Dave songs.
And California Girls, we played it once, I think, maybe. All like great. Yeah, I think because I think David was wanted to mostly focus on like the early Van Halen stuff. I think just because that was more iconic. I was like, let's put Yankee Rose in the set. It's a great song, and everyone was asking about it. But so I knew how to play a few of them. And I can't remember what I was going to say, but with regards to like those songs, actually, like funny you mentioned like Steve Vai, because when we did the Staples Center show, which is like the LA hometown show, loads of like people came to the show, like other bands, artists, and everything. And when we finished playing, we were walking around backstage, and David's business manager was like running up to us, the band. I was like, she was like, "Where's Ryan?" Who's the bass player and MD? Like, "Where's Ryan?" Like, hurry up and get him. Like, Steve Vai is here. He wants to come and say hi to the band. I was like, "Cool, let's go say hi." And then she with Steve Vai, she brings him over, and Steve's like very nice, very humble. It's like, "Nice to meet you all," kind of thing. And he said to like the band, like, "It's funny hearing like my own songs being played back to me." And then he says to Al, like, "The only thing is you're not supposed to play them better than me." And then we all laughed, like, because he was very nice, and like obviously Steve Vai, like no one's going to play anything better than him, but at the same time, it's just fun to hear him say that. So that was a cool moment. But the funny thing about learning like the Van Halen, the Eddie stuff versus the Steve Vai stuff is with Steve Vai, even though he's very crazy and technical, his stuff actually makes sense. It makes sense. Whereas
he went
Eddie
to Berkeley, he knows his music theory.
He got his career by transcribing Frank Zappa songs and submitting them, and that's how he got in the band. So when it comes to learning the Eddie stuff, it's a very different way of playing. Like Eddie is like sporadic and spontaneous, and try learning some of his solos, like even the ones that aren't super flashy, it's just the timing and the phrasing, it just feels so hard to nail it note for note. Whereas Vai, it's like, oh, this, yeah, of course, it's really great written and it's all perfectly played. But I find that stuff actually easier to learn, I guess, because that's how I typically maybe understand things. Whereas Eddie's stuff is like, oh man, how am I supposed to play this? He's playing like this weird grouping, it doesn't make any sense, but it sounds amazing when you hear it. And Eddie's feel as well, like people talk about his tapping and his lead playing and his tremolo stuff and all the flashy stuff, but people often forget like his rhythm playing is probably the thing for me that really is the thing that sets him apart. Like the intro to like I'm the One, that swing and like Hot for Teacher, the feel, the swing. He could like swing like no other rock guitarist. It's like he has a jazz musician's kind of mindset into like a crazy rock guitarist. So learning his stuff was always a fun challenge, and it still is. You know, trying to copy how Eddie plays is very difficult. You know, so
with knowing a lot of the material, but also digging back into it and learning about Yankee Rose from Grand Theft Auto. What do you think about the Spanish language version of Yankee Rose from the Sonrisa Salvaje album?
Yeah, I haven't actually heard all that album, but I remember, when did I first hear that he did this? I think it was on tour. I found out that he'd done everything in Spanish, and I was, that's interesting, kind of cool. I guess he's appealing to a whole new market, which if you're in America, you know, especially in LA, basically everyone here speaks Spanish. So I think it's cool. I should probably go and listen some more and just see what it sounds like. But
the whole thing is on Spotify. Don't you worry.
Okay, I'm going to go and check that out. But yeah, it's funny because I guess not many. I'm trying to think how many other bands or artists have done that where they've recorded everything in another language. You know, which is an interesting thing to do. You know,
if you really want to go down a wormhole, you'll find Motown songs recorded in Italian. You'll find David Bowie songs recorded in Japanese. Everyone kind of did it. Even the Beatles did. It's just a question of whether they survived Spotify copyrights.
Yes, yeah, that's true. No, I've definitely heard like alternate versions of songs that had to change lyrics out, and even some other ones that talk about like the copyright thing, mentioning like products in their songs, like saying like what was that song? Was it by the Kinks? Lola.
Like Cherry Cola.
Yeah, like Cherry Cola. They had to change that because they used the word cola or something. So there's lots of those funny moments in like music history where these things that you would never think about until you kind of learn a story, and there's a whole backstory as to why things are the way they are, and it's kind of interesting. It's just like,
I think Ray Davies, the stories, had to fly back to the US just to record that one word again, like the transatlantic flight, just for that one word being a product placement. And nowadays it's just like, oh, I've got my home studio at home with like my $300 setup. I can just redo it, send off, job done in like 15 minutes. Back then it was like, oh, I have to fly all the way to another country and go to a studio, and it's interesting how music has changed and the efficiency of getting the job done. You know? So back to the Dave tour before I would just let you plug your stuff and I let you go on your way. You know, the word is that the band was tight as ever. The receptions were really good at the Kiss shows. I saw two of the early ones in Vegas in January 2020 when Frankie was in the band. So unfortunately, I haven't gotten to see you play the lineup yet. One day. You know, it sounded like everyone was happy. Everyone was well rehearsed. The band got along perfectly. And if you look on Instagram, the band is still talking all the time. Everyone's friends with everybody.
Yeah, no, we're all that's one of the good things. And I think that's a big part of why why a lot of people get gigs is, number one, obviously you have to be able to play and do the job, right? And everyone has to do that. But most of the time, like on a tour or a gig, you're not actually playing. You're traveling. You're on the hotel. You're eating, sleeping. So only like 10% of your work day is performing. The rest of it is you're with musicians. So you have to be friends with everyone. You have to be able to get along. So we're all good friends. I remember like when I went to do the audition back in end of 2019. Very like played 3 songs. Obviously the whole band were there. David wasn't there. We did Jamie's Crying, You Really Got Me, and something else, I can't remember. Anyway, we played those 3 songs. It was very quick, done. Ryan, the MD, was like, great, thanks for coming. We'll let you know in a week. And then a week later, he phones me up. I was watching Batman at like 11 p.m. He was like, Joe, so do you want to come be in the band? And I was like, sounds good. And then he was like, after that, he was like, just want to say like, thank you for being like a normal person, because he had so many people audition who were just like weird or didn't learn the material. And, the same thing, like when you're on the road, most of the time you just have to hang out and be fun to be around, because that's what you're doing most of the time. So we're all still good friends. It was Ryan's birthday a week or so ago, and went bowling with him and still keep in touch. And the rest of the guys as well, they're all cool people. And, it's also important to maintain that relationship, because we're all doing other things as well as the Roth gig, and we all need other people. Like, you need a bass player, you need a drummer, you need somebody who can write, compose, and produce. It's important to keep these people around, because you can work with each other in other contexts. So, it's all beneficial to,
Something you just said blew my mind right there. You mentioned Ryan's birthday and bowling. And I know that Musselman, former drummer, big bowling guy. I learned about that from interviewing him. So apparently there's a big bowling undercurrent in Dave Lee Roth's Sidemen. But when I interviewed Ron Wixow, Dave's drummer for a tour in the mid-90s, how did he get the gig? He knew somebody who knew somebody from a softball league. So I guess the 80s LA scene was softball, and now the 2010s, 2020s Dave Lee Roth scene is bowling.
I guess so. Yeah, I remember we went bowling once or twice when we were on the road, one of our evenings off, and none of us, I would say, are particularly great at bowling. I think we try, but it's more of a fun activity. But yeah, it's part of the gig. You've got to go bowling. But yeah, it's so we're all still good friends, and hopefully. I'm trying to think, even Ryan played on one of my YouTube songs right at the start of COVID, when everything locked down, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to get back to my YouTube, and Ryan played bass on one of them. And, I'd love to do more stuff with all the bands. Francis on drums is great, and Danny, obviously, on keys was, they're all cool people. And, I'd love to do more stuff with Al, because it's very rare outside of like a rock gig to do a gig with 2 guitarists on the same lineup. Usually it's, 1 guitarist and kind of in the back, especially for like the pop and the R&B stuff. But in the rock show, it's great to have 2 guitarists. So I hope we get to do more stuff together again. I hope it's with David, because that's obviously like the dream lineup. And we were great. Like the band, we rehearsed solidly, and it was all lots of fun, and I love playing the songs, and people seem to like it. So, hopefully more will come from it. But, who knows?
And for people who follow you on Instagram, you performed at an Eddie-related jam tribute night last week, which Frankie, I believe, was on as well.
Yeah, he was there. Yeah, that was cool. Like, we tried to, because it was it's the ultimate jam night at the Whiskey, which used to be every Tuesday before COVID. COVID shut it down, and then they just did the second one last week, and now they're kind of doing it every 2 weeks. And last week's theme was Eddie Van Halen, so it was all Van Halen songs. Guitarist Dream, everyone there was like super good. Frankie was there as part of the house band. There's a few other people there who played with David, or some kind of Van Halen context, Van Halen tributes, whatever it may be. I played there, and so all Van Halen songs. And I had, what did I do? I did Ain't Talking About Love, which was great. And I had my girlfriend, who's a fantastic singer. Her name is Adia Galazi. She's a great rock singer, and we did the song. And I also did Somebody Get Me a Doctor, which was with Michael Starr from Steel Panther. So that was pretty cool.
For Michael, whatever you want to call him, one of the best singers possible.
Absolutely. So that was cool. And the funny thing is, I remember like when I arrived, we were backstage at the Whiskey, and Ralph was just walking around saying hi to people. And I was like, oh, hey, Ralph. Like, well, Michael, I'm looking forward to playing with you. I'm on your song. And I was telling him, like, there's a funny story that when we played the Staples Center, and we were on stage, and the front kind of rows on either side, you have these like VIP cages where, like, I guess high profile people and people who pay a lot of money come to. And we were playing Panama, and I was just watching the crowd, and there was this guy over on the left, like rocking out with the cap on, like singing all the words. And I was like, yeah, that guy's into it. It's cool. And he takes off his cap, and it's like, oh, it's Michael Starr. It's in Steel Panther. It's just like grooving along with a fan. I'm like, yes, that's cool. And I was trying to throw guitar picks to him. I think I probably didn't get anything off the stage, but I told him that, and he was like, yeah, cool. Throw some more picks of me on stage. Appreciate it. And then we went out and we played, and yeah, it was great. So it's funny to actually play with him, do even as just one song. It was a lot of fun. He's a great guy and great performer, great singer.
And was supposed to fill in for that all-star reunion that didn't happen of Van Halen before Dave agreed to it, it was supposed to be Ralph up there on stage playing with Sheen, Bissonette, and Tuggle. So
yeah,
the ultimate understudy for Dave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was a great pleasure to play with him, and maybe we'll get to do it again sometime. They did try to get Michael Anthony to come along to that jam actually, but I think his daughter was sick, so last minute he couldn't make it. But that would have been pretty cool to sort of, if I got the chance to play with Michael, that would have been one more member of Van Halen that I've played with, Then it's Alex, the last one, But yeah, it was good fun. So that's
Exactly. Well, hey, you've been so generous with your time. Please tell me and anybody who's going to hear this, etc., the best places to follow you and look for the new music from Mr. Jake Faun online.
So I'm most active on my kind of day-to-day stuff on Instagram, which is just at Jake Faun Music, JakeFaun Music. If you go on there, that's where I usually upload my just clips of what I'm doing, stories. YouTube is where I do more of like my stuff, which is a bit more like full-length songs, more of like my music and the occasional cover. And that is, you type my name into YouTube and you'll find me. It's just Jake Faun. I have a Facebook page, which is more just friends, family, whatever, and posting stuff. Again, type my name in Jake Faun, you'll find me. But those are the three places I'm most active. I do have one sort of compilation on Spotify as well, which is more of like my country guitar stuff. Again, if you type my name, Jake Faun, into Spotify, you can find that. I do want to put more stuff on Spotify because it's, or Apple Music, any of these places, because it's another outlet for my own music. But Instagram and YouTube are probably the main places to get me. And if you just type in my name, you'll find me. So yeah. Paltrocast.